Hey gang, what's going on? This is Juan from the Byte That team. I am joined once again by Ryan and Keith. We're here at the Squared Roundtable. Now, if you look up above, as always, there's the topic, WWE then versus now. Now, when we say this, we're not saying Attitude Era versus PG Era. We're saying we are these human beings right now. But at some point, we were little toddlers that also enjoyed watching wrestling. We were kids and had a different mindset and a different perspective for wrestling. So that's what we're here to talk about, the contrast then versus now. So with that being said, obviously kayfabe, wrestling, fake or not, that is the initial question I want to bring up, because at some point, you know, we thought that wrestling was not scripted, was the real deal. So taking it to you first, Mr. Poshik, when you first started watching, what did you think wrestling was?
When I very first started watching, I thought it was like not scripted, and like two men just beating the crap out of each other. But that is something that I had ruined for me very early on. I think, within the first 6 months, somebody just straight up told me, like, you know, it's like somebody telling me Santa Claus wasn't real. And it's like, you know,
how was that? How did you feel about that?
I was devastated. I refused to believe it, but no, they made a very compelling point. It's like, okay, now this guy's going to do this. And sure enough, that's what happened, and kind of explained wrestling to me. And I just had the whole thing ruined after that.
Now, Ryan, in your case, unlike Keith and myself, I know you started watching wrestling a little bit after the Attitude Era, so...
Keep in mind, for the point I said, I was like 5 years old, so...
Yeah.
Santa Claus.
But in your case, Ryan, did you always know it was scripted, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, I knew it was scripted before I ever even really got into it. I caught like the tail end of the Attitude Era. Like, I started watching mid-2000, and so I was in middle school, and, you know, all the kids, you know, it was very well known at that point. So, you know, at first I used to make fun of my friend for watching wrestling, and I was like, yeah, I don't get it. If it's fake, why do we even watch it?
And look where you are now.
Yeah, now look where I am now. I don't think he watches wrestling anymore, but look at me still going.
Yeah.
So obviously I kind of tuned into it one day, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll watch it next week. And then the rest of my life happened.
Well, in your case, I guess the obvious choice is that you watch WWF/WWE. So this is more for Keith and myself, just for a little bit of context. Keith, what was your company of choice?
My company of the choice was the WWF back then. That is the first one that I started watching. But I did watch both. I would say it was a solid 75%, 25%. Like, I would watch Raw live and then go back and watch my recordings of Nitro. Like, I did keep up with the whole Monday Night War back in the day. And, yeah.
A lot of wrestling. In my case...
That is a lot of wrestling.
Yeah. In my case, it was WCW, not so much by choice, but it was the only channel. I didn't get the USA Network until 2 months after WCW was bought out. So for 2 months, I had a blackout period where I couldn't watch any wrestling. There was no way it could happen. I had to get VHS tapes of, like, WWF events that are 2-3 months old. So now, Ryan, in your case, so you know wrestling is scripted. What did you enjoy the most about it from, you know, back then?
I really just like the personalities and the excitement of matches and stuff. A big thing about the pros of wrestling when I was a kid was there was so much I didn't know. Not necessarily, oh, I know it's scripted, but you don't recognize the patterns quite as much. A lot of it's still fresh. You see a love story angle or something going on, it's not like you've seen the same one recycled 5 times. A lot of these things you're experiencing for the first time, certain like backstage type brawls and all that stuff. And like, I don't know, I just remember as a kid when Kurt Angle was champion, his first run as WWF champion, and there was the Armageddon Hell in a Cell match. Most people nowadays, you watch wrestling, you'd be like, oh, Angle's gonna retain because they want to keep the title on him this long until they give it to The Rock. But at that time, being new to wrestling, I'm like, he's in there with 5 other people. There's no way he's gonna retain. Somebody else has to win, right? Triple H has to win. Austin has to win. Even Rikishi. Like, somebody else has got to beat him, right? And then hear I couldn't believe that he retained, because I was like, how do you even do that? But nowadays, that would be a very common thing to predict that Angle would retain for other reasons.
It's interesting because even though you knew, there were still the ins and outs of, we talk about it in the podcast.
Exactly, the
after
patterns.
a point, yeah, the patterns. So in your case, Keith, what was your favorite thing? Matches, the storylines, just the overall structure?
Growing up, it was probably the storylines. It was that feeling because I had a bunch of friends that watched wrestling. Like my group in elementary schools, all watched Raw together, basically. So it was the fun of watching the end of Raw, then going to school the next day saying, "Oh, did you see what Stone Cold Steve Austin did? I wonder what's going to happen next week." And just that's what really kept me going.
Yeah, in my case, it was pretty much the same. I remember that I can't recall a lot of matches until after, where you're watching the network or something. But back then, I remember Stone Cold won a match. The Rock won a match when I could watch that. Or, NWO won. Why? I don't know. Just something happened. The storyline kept happening. And you brought up, talking with friends, Keith. Overall, what was your guys' social aspect in wrestling? Was it something you always look forward to? Was it something where, unless somebody brought it up, you sort of kept it to yourself? How was that sort of situation?
During the Attitude Era, for me, it was very strong. Like I said, in elementary school, I had a group of about 5 or 6 friends that we would all watch wrestling. We would go over to somebody's house and play the video games, and it was our lives at that point. And then as I grew up, that kind of changed, and it became more of a personal thing, basically around the invasion angle. That's when it became more of an introverted thing for me. And and then I basically, ever since then, on a personal level, it's been a very just my
You're
thing
just
that I consume.
isolated from it now, just yourself.
Exactly. It's hermit level stuff now.
Now, you mentioned, Ryan, in your case, you call it the tail end of the Attitude Era. So for you, was it just entertainment for yourself? Because you yourself said, your friends admitted it was fake, yet long term, you're the guy still watching it.
I had obviously the friend who I first was kind of teasing about watching it. We watched it together for a little while, and then I had 1 or 2 friends throughout middle school that also watched. So I always had at least one friend. Even when I moved to another town, I made friends with a kid who also liked wrestling. So it's it was always in high school, it was pretty much just me. And that's when I started talking to you guys, actually.
Yeah.
So high school was I didn't have that wrestling friend. And that was ruthless aggression era where wrestling, it was not super popular at that point.
I gotta say, for me, it was sadly isolated almost the whole way. Wrestling, even though Puerto Rico is a huge wrestling territory, for whatever reason, every class I had, if you mentioned wrestling, you were anything but the coolest kid. So it was always I would watch Survivor Series by myself, and all these things. So that's when WWF chat rooms came to be. I'm like, awesome, there's people, and who's this Canadian guy and this guy from Boston? We should do a podcast together 10 years down the road.
And the rest is history.
Absolutely, man. So we talked about the past a little bit. Now let's bring something else, because obviously back then, internet not nearly as popular as it is now, and even look at us right now. Podcast, all these things are so accessible, and we've brought this up before. Dirt sheets. Back then, maybe you just consumed it, every Monday or something like that. But now, every Monday in between, there's all these reports. Who's gonna leave? Who's gonna get pushed? What impact did that have in your watching experience?
There's a lot of spoilers.
Yeah.
We talk about how, people complain that wrestling's so predictable, but there's so much information out there that also aids in that predictability. So it's way harder today to avoid it than it was when, we were, even with the internet when we were kids. It was easy to not be on the dirt sheet websites. They weren't super prevalent in the early internet kind of days. But now with social media, everybody's got social media. So you look on your Facebook feed, if you like anything wrestling or friends with anyone who's into wrestling, you're going to get, spoilers and things like that, even if you can't help it.
So Keith, question
Yes.
then. As Ryan just said, you're so exposed. What if, say you enjoy a storyline, but then you're like, yeah, I want to see what people are thinking on the forums, online, and everybody hates it. Does that have an impact on you? Does that make you think twice about your opinion on the product?
I don't really think it makes me feel twice on my opinion. more than it's like that's the conversation these days that I enjoy. I'm not a big fan of the dirt sheets anymore. There was a time in where I consumed wrestling where it was all dirt sheets all day, just catching up on, oh, this guy's doing this and this guy's doing that. But now it's more about like the wrestling community in general and seeing what people are saying. Like, oh, this guy, I'd like this guy, or let's talk theory or something like that. That's the stuff I really enjoy.
Yeah, you've pretty much brought up all the points I was thinking about the dirt sheet. So, I got 3 sort of lightning round questions to break this up, to feel our own contrast. This is when things can either get really positive or it can make us reflect in a way that maybe we don't want to right now.
Here we go.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Here we go. Okay, first, Ryan, Keith, and myself. Question number 1. Is it still fun for you? Why?
Yes, it's still fun, but it's less about, who the excitement of who's going to win and what could possibly happen, and it's more so seeing like the development of the company and characters over a long period of time, and also being able to have far more in-depth discussion about things than I was as a kid. So, is it more fun? Well, I'll leave it at that because I don't know what your other questions are.
I can't say it's more fun, but I do definitely enjoy it for different reasons these days, and that's part of being a part of that community and all that interaction.
Yeah, Sam, I gotta say, I think it's less fun for me, but I enjoy it more. It seems a little weird because back then you would just watch it. Maybe you think a little bit, oh, what's going to happen? And then you forget about it till next Monday.
You enjoy the product itself more, but not everything around it. Yeah.
You're more passionate about it. You know a lot more, so it keeps you more interested, at least for me. Next, name one thing that keeps you watching now. One thing in particular that we brought it up in the past similarly. What is that one thing?
Seeing characters and wrestlers you're invested in develop, basically. Well, you know what I mean? What other thing can you watch Triple H or someone over 15 years? There's not many other things besides maybe like baseball players who play that long.
That's a very good one. But for me, have to go back to Community. It's just seeing how people react and seeing how everything goes from a mass scale.
Yeah, for me, I need to pretty much agree with what Keith said there. As a kid, I always wanted to just have deeper conversations about the topic, even though it's fake and all these things. It's nice when you get to sit down and we get to shoot the crap sometimes. Keith, I thought this was like this, but you think otherwise. And we can have that debate the same way you would a TV show. So I think that's easily one of my favorite things. Now, that's what keeps us watching now. But if there was one thing that you could pull back from Little Keith, Little War Machine, that could be active now, either from the product or even yourself, like your own mindset about wrestling, what would that thing be?
I think it's really believing in it, believing in the matches. Because like I said, even though I knew it was scripted, when you'd watch a match with like Jeff Hardy versus Triple H for the Intercontinental Championship, you believed, you were hoping you were hanging on every false finish. And it's not like you already knew who was going to win before they even hit the ring. And when Jeff Hardy did actually win, it was like the most amazing thing ever. So I think it's just being able to sit there and just put the predictability aside and really just believe in every finish and everything, which can happen from time to time, but it's very rare where you really have those matches where it could really go either way.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Ryan, completely. If I could go back and just believe in the characters again and not think like, oh, this guy's just playing this on TV, he's going to tweet later and talk about this and that. But go back to that point where, oh, Triple H hit Stone Cold Steve Austin with a sledgehammer at the end of Raw. What's Stone Cold going to do next week to get back at him? If I could go back to believing in that pure instinct, I would love it.
Yeah, for me, I would have to say it's similar, but regarding the storyline specifically. Like right now, say there's this amazing storyline happening where I'm like, Ryan, I cannot wait for next week. My initial thought is, oh, that was a great storyline. Like, I think of the behind the scenes, like, wow, that was really well done.
Somebody wrote that real well.
No, it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's true. I was just thinking that too, where it's like, oh, or we'll say, oh, they did this just so that he can look good for this match or whatever. Like,
Exactly.
you're thinking, you're not in the moment. You're thinking about all the backstage crap and everything that went into that moment instead of just enjoying the moment for what it is. That's a big one.
And it's ridiculous how in movies, when you first start watching, maybe you see the actor, but, you know, maybe halfway or even earlier, you just focus on the story or something. With wrestling, it's gotten to the point where it feels weird. You sort of feel dirty when you only think about the story. It's like, it's fake, but so is everything else, even music, you know? So that is the one thing that I would absolutely love to see back, at least for me. So for everybody...
But I mean, if we were like... Sorry to interrupt you,
no,
but
go ahead, man.
If we were like a filmmaker or a director or something and we saw a movie, we might actually think that way about a movie, you know?
Absolutely.
It's certain things like that.
Yeah, it's a little detail. So that's why I really do want to ask everybody watching, what was the one thing that you really enjoyed back then that you wish, you know, you could go back into that younger child? Or I know even the audience now, a lot of people never saw the Attitude Era. So, you know, what was your experience when social media has effectively always been involved, you know, through forums or a lot of stuff? Let us know by leaving a comment below. Remember to subscribe to the channel. The podcast is available every single Tuesday.
Oh.
Kind of.
Well,
We sort of did it. It sort of worked.
You threw me off.
Yeah. And on the channel, we got a ton of different Square Roundtable. Top indie stars taking over the WWE, best finishers. We talk about factions, what if the WWE Network failed. So make sure you check those out. If you have any recommendations, anything that you want us to talk about right here on this table, even though it's totally... We technically have 3 tables here. Let's be honest.
I mean, my microphone's on the table. Does that count?
Exactly. I don't know what Ryan's... I think that's a box. But anyway, thanks everybody for checking out the video. And we'll be back with a ton more Square Roundtables right here on Byte That.